Tandem HR.
Exceptional workplaces.
Exceptional people.
So, by the way, for those of you that are part of the Tandem family, and that includes all the Alliance Workplace Solution, the solution customers, and as well as Tandem HR, our real purpose is to create a training room that will be available anytime for our clients. There's actually a lot of meeting rooms on the first floor that are available. So we want you to think of us as your Western suburban office space. For those of you, many of you have offices that are all over the country and you don't always have meeting area. So please let us know, and we're more than happy to let you know. You know, I wanted to say one quick thing. I always remember when I became an entrepreneur, people said, "Oh, you must really, you can't work for anybody," which is probably true. I don't get along that well with people, but all right. I always said to them, I said, you really don't understand. I went from having one boss to having 300 bosses. And I've sort of always lived my life. People know that I wake up every morning and I have this bad dream every night that every customer's decided to go do business somewhere else, And so I really, every day for me is just another thank you that you guys are doing business with us, and we're trying to grow as a company to sort of meet the needs of a lot of challenges out there to run a business. Obviously, we all know there's healthcare. People might have heard there's some kind of new healthcare plan going on out there, and there's all kinds of challenges out there running a business. And I love entrepreneurs. I love small and mid-sized businesses, and we're really here to support it and help grow it. I think you'll hear from John Slavik a little later. We were talking last night about just really we feel this is the vehicle that's going to really help this country recover. It's really the small and mid-sized entrepreneurs that are really pulling that, and we're so happy to be a part of it. And when I want to say thank you, I always remember Woodrow Wilson. Anybody remember Woodrow Wilson? I got these young kids, I don't know the history, but Woodrow Wilson was president about in the early 1900s. So apparently he was from Kansas, and he was very tall and thin, and his father was even taller and thinner. His father was about 6'6", and he weighed about 120 pounds. And he was in Kansas. He would go around, and he was sort of the reverend. He would go around and administer and people in small towns in Kansas. And he had a horse that would drive him around that was a big, fat horse. And one day Woodrow was going with his father to go meet with the parishioners and go do some house calls. And somebody came out and he said to Woodrow, he said, "How come it is that your father is so tall and thin, but this horse is so short and fat?" And little Woodrow, 9 years old, he said, "Because you see, my father feeds the horse, but the parishioners feed my father." And I've always thought of that as a way that I always have to remember really who feeds us, and to say thank you, and to hopefully you'll get a lot of value from today, and we can continue to share in business growth and learning together. So thank you for coming and issuing our new space.
Our presenter and leader of the workshop is John Slavik. John's been a foundational partner with his business in the 401k. It's been an awesome resource for us and for our clients to help them and their employees efficiently find ways to save for the future. And here's John Slavik.
Thank you. It's great to be here and be part of the Tandem inauguration of this building. It's a fantastic step forward for the Tandem organization. We have been the 401k provider for 7 or 8 years now at Tandem, and I'm a 401k provider to the professional employer organization PEO industry. We have roughly 100 PEO clients, and really Tandem ranks up in that #1 spot in terms of the service delivery models and so on that they bring to their clients. And without question, the service platform that Tandem brings to the table makes a lot of things a whole lot more efficient. And probably foremost among them would be the 401k, because most small and medium-sized businesses struggle with a 401k. In fact, the national average is only 16% of small businesses have a 401k plan. Yet through the PEO structure, the 401k can be delivered to every client very cost effectively, so that all employees would have the opportunity of saving and building for the future. And we've been really privileged to partner with Bruce and Gail and the whole team, Sam, and how we've integrated from a technology standpoint the 401k plan to make it very efficient and be delivered to the Tandem clients. So we're really thrilled to be here and to be part of this. And I get to introduce Tom Kuzmarski. Is that close enough? And I'm going to read some of the stuff because it's so voluminous I couldn't remember it all. But Tom is a nationally recognized expert in the field of innovation. And frankly, innovation is one thing that is just so interesting, I think, to everybody. It's that combination of ideas that creates a synthesis of something brand new that creates efficiency, that creates kind of a whole new paradigm. So I'm very anxious to hear what Tom has to say. He has been a leader in kind of systematically putting innovation inside organizations. And frankly, from my standpoint of a 25-year-old company, innovation, we've done a lot in that area. And it doesn't happen just accidentally. It happens because you intentionally put the pieces together to make it work on behalf of our clients and inside our organization. Tom teaches product and service innovation at Northwestern's Kellogg School of Business, and is the co-founder of the Chicago Innovation Awards, which I think is taking place in just about a month from now. And I guess Tandem has many client companies that have been awarded the Innovation Award. Evid in 2011, Brightseed in 2012, In Context Solutions 2010, and Sabo in 2007. And finalist this year is Advanced Diamond Technology. So this is a sort of cauldron of creativity. So here is Tom. I gotta love his glasses. And, no one has glasses like Tom, and you can tell he's an innovation guy because he can wear glasses like this. So Tom, thank you.
Well, how's everybody doing today? So they told me to come on over here, spend an hour with you, and I'm supposed to try to teach you something. So I hope I'm going to be able to do that, but I'm going to give it a shot. See if I can. I know, because I looked around the room and saw all these smart people here. So hey, let me tell you who I am. I'll give you the quick overview. And for the last. Actually, I stopped saying the number of years, but I've been at Kellogg since 1980, and I hope some of you are not so good at math. I can't quite figure that out. So when I see the people doing the math in their head. And I've had a consulting business for many years now, and I really have four passions. One is technology, the second is innovation, the third is entrepreneurship, and the fourth is really Chicago and this Midwest region. Because I think it's a vital place where we bring lots of different types of innovations and startups and companies together. And I think too long that place on the West Coast was getting credit for it. So that's why with the Chicago Innovation Awards, I've tried to shine a bright light right here in the Midwest. In terms of the consulting business, we try to help companies develop new products and new services. Lots of times when I say I'm a consultant and a professor, you can see kind of the glazed look over somebody's face. But actually, my middle son gave me a great definition of what a consultant is. I have three boys. They're now ages 29, 28, and 23. But the middle guy, who now works at Google out in Mountain View, just loved numbers and loved science and everything. So he was down in my office one Saturday, and I was filling out an invoice for a client. He asked me what an invoice was, so I explained it to him. And then a little boy came over to the house, a friend of his, the next week, and the little boy asked him what Jamie's dad did. Jamie said, well, my dad's a consultant. And the little boy said, well, what's a consultant? Jamie said, well, a consultant is somebody that mails letters out to people and they mail money back. So that's all I do. That's about the extent of my work. I'll tell you one other thing, though, and that is that I've written a lot of books on innovation and on leadership. And here's the fundamental thing that I have found. You got to have an innovation strategy. Of course you do. You got to have an innovation process. Of course you do. You need to understand customers' problems, issues, and needs. We're going to talk about that today. But you know what? Ultimately, it's all about the culture. It's all about the way in which you, as the leaders of your organizations, can inspire and motivate people to contribute, to take risks, and ultimately to feel as if they can fail. Why? Why? Let me throw that out to you. We don't want failures, right? We want successes. So why in heck, one of my strong beliefs is to throw failure parties within organizations. Why would you ever throw a failure party? To encourage people to take risks. And how does that happen, Roberto? What?
If they're not worried about punishment for failure.
If they're not worried about punishment for failure. And what else? What else do you get out of that? And you learn the lessons learned. So I'm a strong believer in celebrating success, and we'll also talk about even rewarding people differently within organizations. But we've got to also encourage a learning environment where we can learn as much from our mistakes and our failures, smart failures, hopefully, as we do from our successes. So before I start, I just want to spend a couple of minutes and find out from you, what's a challenge, what's an issue, what's something you're currently trying to figure out or struggle with as it relates to innovation within your own organization? Sure. The good. What's your name? Patrice said, "What about the emotional aspect of all this? Because if you fail, right, you can feel bad. Every year I teach for a week in Bangkok, Thailand, and if you've ever been to Bangkok, Thailand, failure, oh my gosh, is a total embarrassment by Thai. So it's a challenge." So how do you deal with that? Yeah, good. Please.
I would say convincing the leadership that you can allow some of these failures and still protect your ultimate customers from quality lapses.
So how do you convince leadership about really what are the key characteristics of a world-class innovation organization and culture? Okay, it doesn't have to be culture too. Anything that's on your mind in terms of innovation. Well, let me ask this. How many of you are focused on doing something that's innovative within your organization today? So, a few. What are you doing? Julianne, yeah.
I don't think we are doing anything. Well, I think we're so busy doing what we do.
Doing what you do.
That's the problem, is there's not the time to work on the innovation.
Okay, good.
But we need to do it, but we need to make time for it.
Good. So that's often an issue I hear a lot. I'll hear a lot this whole issue of innovations are growth. You know, it's our lifeblood. We've got to do it. We've got to find ways to do it. Okay, great. Well, who's working on it now? Well, we're stretched too thin, and we got too much on our plate, and we just don't have time to. So I hear that a lot. What else? What other issues or questions? Because if I don't address some of these specific ones for you, you may leave here. Yeah.
I have a 10-year obsession with a double patented system that will help Obamacare greatly.
Mm-hmm. So how to commercialize it is your question, or
what it will do is what it does is we'll have it out in December. It will make the blood pressure machine. We help kiosks in Walmart and locations like that. It will form a positive ID. And you can, when you improve your health, like with weight, it will automatically rebate you from the insurance company.
Terrific. That's great. So that's an interesting one you're working on. What else are you thinking about in terms of innovation?
We're involved in the energy business. We have clients that pay less for electricity. Yeah, but there's always energy efficient products coming out in the marketplace in different ways. Implementing that into our clients and the struggle that I always have. We don't necessarily partner with how to bring that in.
Sure. Good. And that's a great point. You guys want to sit down? Or, no. It's going to be a long. Anybody else? Yeah.
I'm Donna from Citadel, and what we're trying to do is create a culture that supports our employees' pet projects from their charitable organizations. We've had a fundraiser. We have one of our warehouse employees, I think he has a 1957 Chevy, and so we allow him and his Chevy in our warehouse so we can work on it for weekends.
Terrific. That's great. And how well is that going yet, or is it just kind of started?
Oh, it's going really well.
Oh, good.
It really unifies the team.
Terrific. That's great. So how to do more of that is kind of your question, or how to take that to the next level? Okay, good. Well, as we go through this today, if there's any other things that surface, please, I'd rather have this be more of a dialogue than a presentation, and we'll maybe even do a few little exercises too. Yeah.
One more
Sure.
kind of issue. You know, we are very innovative, but to spark more of it within our culture, what I find is people go to the tactical side of things, like, well, how are we going to make that happen? Or even more so, they're afraid of having a bad idea. And you know, my mindset is, well, you might have 20 bad ideas, that's fine. Let's just bring them up. But they can't handle kind of rejection, if you will, that their idea wasn't accepted right away. It's like, well, that's okay, you're thinking the right thing. And so I guess I'd be curious of how to eliminate some of those barriers of feeling. It's not like they can just give it to us, but
Sure.
there's this fear of failure of not coming up with the right
Yep.
idea.
Terrific. And that's similar to what Patrice even started with at the beginning in terms of the emotional side of it, right? And how do we begin to overcome that and address that within an organization?
We're a consumer products company,
Mhm.
and typically we have to come up with 60 to 80 products a year and take old ones out and recycle them. And it's great because we have a culture of developing products spearheaded by our CEO. Problem is, anything he sees is going to be the next great thing. How do you then manage that process to bring it under control?
It's called the shiny ornament syndrome.
In his case, dull works too.
Yeah. Sure. Cross-functional coordination and how to do that, because you're dealing with people that really, A, don't know each other, and B, certainly don't know each other's functions, and so you're often speaking a language that you don't understand. Terrific. Well, we'll try to hit on some of those points. And just so you know, I've done consumer goods and services and lots of B2B and government, so it's across the board, and I find innovation is applicable to all. So I want to start by asking you a question. What's the greatest invention that you can think of in the past 30 years? The greatest innovation?
Cell phone.
Cell phone, what? Internet. Cell phone, internet, what else? Last 30 years.
The PEO.
The PEO. The first time in any group I've ever heard that statement, John. The first time ever. Okay.
Personal computer.
Personal computer. Email. DVR. Are those the ones that come top of mind? Okay. Now, they're all computer related, right? They're all internet related. Why does that surface to the top? PEO does not surface to the top. Changes the what?
It's always changing.
It's always changing.
It's productivity.
It impacts us, right? Whether it's productivity, whether it's speed, whether it's connectivity, whether it's personalization, individuality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are innovations that impact every single one of us. Let me ask you another question. Just to prove to you, I hope, that I'm a mind reader. Right now, I want you to think of one truly innovative company, not product, not or service, but a company, truly innovative company. You got it, Brett? Okay. Is that company either Apple or Google? Oh, I couldn't read his mind then. What was it? Is it called? Elminda? EEG sees the brain in real-time network. Wow.
Concussion management, you can tell whether you're concussion, so the symptoms go, you get to the brain, see if it's actually not true.
Wow, that's cool. That's great. Yeah. How many said either Apple or Google? Okay. No, that's okay. Because 80% of everybody else did throw it. I'm glad you didn't though. Why? Why did Apple and Google? I mean, right? We all know there's thousands and thousands of companies and organizations, and why Apple and Google?
Better marketing.
Better marketing. Types of technology. Okay, so again, it goes back to my opening that any type of innovation that impacts us directly, individually, emotionally, psychologically, functionally, always has this mystique to it that ultimately gets us to the top. Here's the big problem with it. Most of you in this room should not try to become Apple and Google. Uh-oh. I said it. Why not?
Difficult. The first one in is not the one that's successful.
True. And if anybody thinks that Apple has not had many failures, right? And many prototypes that didn't make it to market. And at the same time, as much of a strong and massive supporter I am of Google's culture, because they do so many things right there, they also have had many failures, and they've set many innovative fires within their organization to try to see what will emerge and what will come up, and they've done some amazingly wonderful and creative things, but it still comes down to, right, many organizations, if you're a smaller entrepreneurial or even mid-sized company, you can't afford a lot of failures. So we also need to look at innovation from the standpoint of creating a systematic process, setting expectations, and then ultimately dedicating and allocating our people in a way, and ultimately being cross-functionally, that will give us the highest probabilities of success. So innovation permeates all sectors. Let me give you a few examples. Any of you have heard of an old 90-year-old manufacturer, sink manufacturer called LK? Even in my office, an old sink and LK brand is right in the top of the faucet. They identified a need in the marketplace. And the marketplace need was, instead of going to a park, you know, where the water bubbler is and the dogs will drink out of it too, and they do drink out of it, this is their easy H2O bottled water filling station. So you take your water bottle, and there's an antimicrobial component at the top of it, and you just put your bottle under it and fill it. And they're now in municipalities, airports, and it's just been one of their biggest successes. How did they get there? They got there by going out and understanding real market needs, customer needs. It wasn't developing the technology first, it was understanding the problems and issues in the marketplace first. SMS Assist, has anybody heard of this company? It's only 3 years old, and they're getting close to a couple $100 million in revenues. And when Michael Rothman started this company, here's what the thought process was. If you go to a Best Buy, a store manager at a Best Buy has to be responsible for all of their services. So the store manager is going to arrange the snow removal and the lawn care and the electricians and the plumbers and whomever, whatever vendors that store manager has to deal with. SMS Assist developed the technology where all Best Buy managers across the country can now connect into their technology. Just call and email in the morning, say I need a snow removal, and then they'll do that because they now have a national network of vendors and suppliers. What's the benefit to the Best Buy or the Family Dollar store manager? Convenience. What else? They get to work on the, right, whether the business of employees or customers or exactly. So it's really a huge productivity provider to those store managers. And also, from a cost standpoint, SMS Assist has been able to work a lot of deals with a lot of vendors because they'll be doing this across the country. Pretty simple idea, but well executed. Public-private sector. How many have been to 1871? Good. It's a entrepreneurial incubator in the Merchandise Mart, and this was really a joint venture between public money and private money, geared to create a community, an incubator community for entrepreneurs. And here's one thing that I see happening more and more today. It's one of my big trends I see over the last couple of years. Big companies are finally understanding the value of small entrepreneurs, of small startups. Because for years, you know what would happen. There was the big moat, right? And you drive up out here, and there's a big moat around corporate headquarters. You go through lots of security, right? Because if it wasn't really invented there, I mean, it really wasn't all that good. Large companies have now totally, in my view, changed and understand the need to build bridges, connect, look at entrepreneurs, look at inventors, do strategic partnerships, joint ventures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with smaller companies, not only near them, but around them. And so I think that's been a great shift, and I see more and more of that happen. In the city of Chicago now, you've got Divvy bikes just about on every street corner. What's the benefit of that to consumers? Sure. And not having to have one themselves because they can rent one. I'll show you in a second this one in Japan of a little parking lot that was created for bikes. The problem there was both theft as well as weather, and this was a solution in Tokyo that they came up with, which I think is kind of.
Hey, comrades! How you doing? So, we're in the middle of a Shinagawa, really hot summer's day today. So I need to get out of this heat before I start to melt. But before I do that, I'd love to show you some absolutely fantastic technology with these bicycle parks over here, where bikes are actually sucked into these big machines over here, like drawn deep into the depths of the earth. So, let's have a look.
違法駐輪、放置自転車など日本の都市問題を見事に解決している駐輪場。どんな技術なんでしょう?
Alright, let me show you exactly how these bicycle parks work. So, you notice at the front of my bike over here, you can see one of these things attached over here. This is actually an IC chip. There's a chip inside over there. And what happens is, when I move it towards the bicycle park, it'll recognize that I've got an account over here, and it'll open the doors for me. So what I do this is, all right, it's going to grip the front wheel. It lifts up a little bit. Then it's asking me to stand behind these yellow lines, which I'm going to do over here. Then, actually, let me check to see if my wallet or any valuables are not over here. Okay, that's absolutely fine. And I'll press the green button. And then it goes down over there. And in about 14 seconds, it kind of like goes down, spins around, and it finds a parking space.
.回転しながらスピーディーに収納されていきます。大切な自転車を 雨やいたずらからも守ってくれます。
So private sector, public sector. It's also a lot more than just new products. Has anybody heard of Ocean Tomo? Ocean Tomo, if you've ever been to a, who's been to an auction? You know where you hold up your paddle, your bid? So, exact same thing. Ocean Tomo is an auction, except that what you're buying, what you're trying to bid on, is intellectual property, patents, and trademarks. And so if you're a small company that doesn't have a lot of R&D capability and you're looking for a biotechnology patent, then you go to Ocean Tomo and you bid on it. And so they're kind of an eBay for intellectual property. Or Socore Energy, they got into the solar leasing business. They were just bought last month by Edison International in California and have been very successful. I won't show you the video of it, but TCU is a live teller ATM. So now you go to an ATM, and what pops up is a real person who's talking to you. It's not like an avatar. It's a real person who's talking and engaging and answering questions and the like. What's the benefit of that to a consumer? And what about it? Hey, what?
Quality of the user experience.
Okay, and what makes it higher quality? It's what?
They're responding in real time.
Responding in real time, sure. Plus the hours now that you can go to an ATM, I think they've extended it, it started in Saskatchewan, Canada, from 6 in the morning until almost 11 at night. What's the benefit to the bank?
Less expensive.
It's less expensive now, because now you're not talking about having a row of tellers in all of the banks that are just sitting there. You're talking about a backroom office of ATM people that are doing multiple banks over multiple periods of time. So cost savings for them too. And even NASA developed an organization called Stelsis, the first joint venture that looked at the cell tissuing. And the problem there was, what type of experiments could we do in outer space where you don't have gravity pulling down on them? And they formed a new organization that looked at cell tissue culturing. So I can take a piece of cell from my knee and send it up in a space station, and it's going to grow exponentially faster than it would with gravity pulling down. So again, innovation can be everywhere. This last year, the Chicago Innovation Awards, these were the 10 Innovation Award winners, and we have 10 Up-and-Comer Award winners for entrepreneurs. And I'll just highlight one that I think is so interesting. Cummins Allison is a company that's 156 years old, and they were one of the winners. They developed a check and cash currency counter that counts both checks and cash together in 1,600 of them in 1 minute. So who might benefit from that type of product? Banks, casinos, retail, sure. I mean, anybody that's got any combination of those two. Two others I'll share with you. TurboTap. This was invented by Matt Yonkel, who went to the University of Madison and did not like waiting in line at football games. So he created TurboTap that dispenses beer in 6 seconds instead of 22 seconds. What's the benefit to the consumer? You get to drink more. Lose more brain cells, right? What else? Get back to the game, right? That's the real problem solution here, is that now we're not waiting in line for the beer, we're able to, and missing the game, we're able to get back there. What's the benefit to the food service operator? More sales, right? Higher productivity, higher customer satisfaction. And what's fascinating to me is that because the beer is flowing faster through the tube lines, consumers actually think it's fresher tasting too. So it's a win-win. He's now in 60% of all professional stadiums in the U.S. and has expanded to Canada and Mexico. And the other one I'll share with you is Walgreens, because I just thought this was brilliant 10 years ago when they came out with multilingual prescription labels. So in 14, actually it's now 17 languages that they offer these in. And so the benefit to the consumer is you're able to take the right dosage of medication, get better faster. What's the benefit to Walgreens? Since this is free, they don't charge you for this. It's what? Oh, okay, so that's part of it. What else? It's a whole new demographic, right? So now they're getting segments of consumers in what else about that segment of consumers? Customer loyalty, word of mouth, and then where's the pharmacy? Yeah, because it's in the back of the store, so that you might buy a few incremental items along the way. So again, I think innovation is all about trying to think through what the market end user needs are and how you can serve customers better. So here's my operating definition for innovation. And it's pretty simple. It's really anything that's new that does three things, but it has to do three things. It has to offer a new perceived benefit to a employee, customer, end user, consumer, whoever that end constituency is. It has to be differentiated from competition, and ultimately, it has to be valued by them. It has to be valued and be perceived as relevant. Then and only then can you expect economic value to come from innovations. Too often I find organizations start at the end and say, how can we get our margins up? We've got to come up with new services and products to get our margins up. Okay, well that's good to do, of course it is, but where we need to start is by understanding the needs of the marketplace. I also believe that innovation is about new customer experiences, new marketing programs, new services, new businesses, new business models. So it's not just pigeonholed into one type of innovation, but rather a variety of them. How many of you have launched a new service or product or business into the marketplace within the last year? Just raise your hand. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. How did it do, Brian?
Going very well.
Went very well.
Yeah.
Did it exceed expectations? Fall short of expectations?
Never goes as fast as you want it to, but it's still all right.
Yeah. But pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Now, was it a service or a product or a program?
It's a combination of products and services working together.
Product and service. Okay. Good. What was yours, Max?
Ours was a service as well, and it's to the association marketplace. And seeing that we're very about how they're developing their strategic plan and really taking a look at segmenting the members on to
Yeah.
those segmenting. And it's not good.
Oh, good. Good. What was your key to success? Those of you that launched it, what would you define, Elliot, as the key to success?
I think the key for us, what you mentioned before, was understanding the client
How about you, Frank?
I mean, the biggest one is probably the differentiation from competition in terms of bringing a different business model to market.
Okay, good. And the point is, right, there's not like one magic success formula, right, for what makes an innovation successful, but usually it's got to be some combination of that. It's got to address that market need, that user need. It's got to be differentiated from competition clearly enough, and ultimately it's got to provide economic value for the firm. So that's what we want to try to talk about. When we look at culture, this is often what I'll see in organizations. What we need is an overarching strategy to stimulate our innovation. Or you could stop smothering the innovation we already have. That's the dumbest idea I've heard in my entire life. And there it is. And that's what I'll hear so often. What I'll hear is, when Patrice comes up with a new idea, okay, I'll say to her, oh, we tried that a number of years ago, and really, don't waste your time on that, Patrice, because you'll just be going down a dead path. It's not the right place to be. So then what happens to the second idea? She's going to sit on it. She's going to sit on it. The number one barrier to innovation cultures today is a 4-letter word starting with F and ending with R, and there's an E and the A in the middle. And it's fear. It's the number one barrier is fear. Whether it's fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not looking good, fear of embarrassment, fear, all different types of it. So if we're going to talk about creating a culture of innovation, that's one of the fundamental things that we've got to try to not eliminate. I'm not talking about eliminating it, because I believe in real world solutions, but at least mitigating it and doing some things and putting some practices in place that can begin to overcome this type of mindset. So let me ask you this question. When you walk into an innovative culture, innovative organization, from your own personal perspective, what do you see? What do you feel? What's going on there? Whether you've heard about it from a friend or a spouse, or you're working in one right now, or you've been in one in the past. What's going on in innovation? Okay, you feel positive energy.
You see whiteboards all over the place with ideas, people working together.
Whiteboards, ideas, people working together. People are dressed like they're going to the beach. What else? What else do you see or feel or sense? Smiles. Smiles. Maybe even laughter. Eagerness and excitement. A dog? Oh, a dog. A dog. That's right. A dog.
Personalized workspaces.
Personalized workspaces. Now, if it's next Tuesday morning, and you walk into your office, and you open the door, and what you find is this more informal, lots of energy, lots of excitement, dogs running around, people talking to each other, whiteboards, ideas are flowing, there's a lot of passion, exchange of ideas. How would that make you feel? Some people have told me they feel like they walked into the wrong office, but
You want to be a part of it.
you want to be, why?
Because it seems exciting.
And it's one way, exactly. Shirley Ann? Yeah, Shirley. It's one way to start to address this issue of fear. Because what we're trying to create is an environment where people feel that it's okay to be informal. It's okay to talk and not go sit in an office all day by themselves and send people emails that are down the hallway, etc., right? No. It's trying to create an environment for collaboration, where lots of dialogue takes place. And that often is missing in organizations. Sometimes with entrepreneurs, I'll talk about that type of culture. And sometimes they'll say, oh, that sounds too, that sounds too wacky. It sounds like, chaos. That sounds like, I go, yeah. And I'm not saying that you don't want your manufacturing plants to necessarily adopt that type of mindset. But we're talking about innovation. It's important for people to feel as if the types of ideas and thoughts and new angles and perspectives that they can bring to a cross-functional team are going to be done. And that's what it's all about. So if we're talking about creating a culture of innovation, this is kind of my way of thinking about it. There's a few innovation best practices that you kind of got to sort of do, and I'll talk about those in a second. And the rest of this is all about three things. What are the values and the norms that you've created for your organization to support the desired culture that you want for your organization? And then what are you, as leaders of the organization, doing to ensure that the culture and the values and the norms are reinforced and fit? In the mid-1990s, my wife and I, Dr. Susan Smith Kuczmarski, the smarter of our family, and she's also my wife for 37 years and best friend, and we write books together. So if you write books together, right, you gotta have something going, because otherwise it's too difficult. And in 1995, we published a book called Values-Based Leadership. Values-Based leadership was the first book written on the topic of values. Now you see a lot written on values, which is great. So back in the 1990s, when we would go out and talk to CEOs about values-based leadership, they would have often these two comments to us. They would say, oh, values. What are your values? Have you talked to our HR person yet? And then secondly, they'd say, oh, yeah, values. Well, we've got those up on the wall in our lobby. What's the problem with those two responses? Disconnect. And in fact, here's what we found. In doing research with 200 organizations, we talked to people at the top of an organization, and we talked to people in the middle of an organization. And we said, what are your values? What are the values that you have within this company, within this organization? Over 70% of the time, we got two different answers. So it's what we call a values gap. A values gap that existed between what senior management at the top of a company was saying are the values that we believe in versus at mid-level of an organization, the values that people were experiencing. What's the problem with that? And that, Ira, you just jumped ahead a couple. Because ultimately, that is the impact of that. When there's a values gap, first and foremost, there's often dysfunctionality within your own company, within your own organization. But the worst part about it is that that values dysfunctionality gets conveyed and communicated ultimately to your client and to your customers. So that's why this is important to pay attention to. So here's what I'd like you to do. Does everybody have a piece of paper and pencil? At least one person at your table. Let's see. Ira, you need to move with a group. So you're not by yourself. You got to be with at least 4 or 5 other people. I mean, if it's only 3, that's okay. But we're trying to get with 4 or 5 other people. And here's what I'd like to ask you to do. I want you to be, just for the next 4 or 5 minutes, a pretend company. And it's good to start by introducing yourself to everybody, but in 1 second. So here's what I want to ask you to do. Jeff, you can join in. You can join that first. Here's what I want you to do.
Pardon me?
I want you to write down 2 values. I want you to be this pretend company, okay, this pretend company for the next 4 or 5 minutes. I want you to write down 2 values. How are you going to get to those 2 values? There's only one way. Each of you are going to have to talk a little bit about what's one important value to you. And then as a group, then pick 2 to kind of represent your pretend company. The second thing I want you to do, I want you to write down 2 or 3 words that will depict the type of innovation culture then that you want for this company. So 2 values, and then 2 to 3 words that will describe the type of innovation culture that you want for this company. Any questions? Why is this important to do? Why is this important to do in an organization? Obviously, not to take 4 or 5 minutes, but to take a much longer time period. Why is it important to get every single employee's involvement in the discussion on values? To get their buy-in, but Charlene, here's what I'll often hear. I often hear this from people at the top. And they'll say, well, if they come up with values that we don't want, I mean, then what are we going to do with that? Fire them, right? But too often that is the mindset, right? The mindset, the wrong mindset is the CEO, the COO who thinks wrongfully that the values and the culture all come from them. They're the ones that set the values and the culture. The right answer is that you've got to include and embrace every employee within the environment. And I don't care if we're talking 10 employees, or I don't care if we're talking about IBM with 330,000 employees. In all cases, you've got to involve everybody in this type of endeavor. And ultimately, with the culture that you want. So, just for a minute, I mean, just for, for 15 seconds each, just share with us what were your values and the intended culture that you had for your little company. Oh, I mean, would you mind just standing up so people, or if you want to use the mic, is there one? Sam? Yeah, use the mic. Just so
we didn't quite complete our second one fully, but we did integrity, and that's more integrity to the company, integrity to your fellow employees, and integrity to yourself.
Oh, cool.
It also leads to integrity to your clients and to our customers.
Cool.
And then we were working...
Four-way integrity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the second one, we were working on culture culture, so more of like a family-based culture, so that people are based on what they do and have flexibility within the work environment.
Terrific. Love it. That's great. Thank you. How about over here? George.
Okay, so our two words were collaboration and then kind of going to the other side of it, personal responsibility / ownership. And what we're thinking there is everyone has to have the personal ownership, like you own this project or this aspect of it, of a relationship, etc. But yet you need to collaborate, so not to be confused with, you need to work as a team, but you still need to own up what you need to take care of the team. And then in terms of a 2 to 3 words that depict a culture of innovation, we have like either open or shared space, so physically, and we just started talking about recognition, but we didn't identify exactly what that is. I know at our office sometimes we will do the money dance, sometimes we will ring the bell. We've got shared space, we have big open space, so people know that something did happen.
Terrific. So the whole a culture of recognition. Great. Thanks. How about this?
Sure. So values that we put on our amazing company was honesty, respect, and trust. And then the words that describe the culture were collaborative and resilient.
Collaborative and resilient. Okay. Terrific.
What we came up with was treating your customers and your employees like you would like to be treated, kind of working business like the golden rule, and to that effect, you know, working and living by the business code of ethics for customers and employees, and then working in a team environment with open communication and collaboration, quality of team members, fun environment, promoting your employees' personal causes.
Love it. Love it. That's great. And one more about this.
Well, here at Team DJ PM, we believe that integrity is foundational, as you did, and also customer focus. And I like what Patrice said, that integrity can either drive or derail a sense of trust internally or externally. Some of the things, adjectives we came up with were energetic, proactive, continuous learning culture, open-minded, and having teaching feedback.
Love it. Love it. Just dynamite. Well, thank you so much for doing that. And I just want to follow up with that with this. Why is it so difficult to change culture? Because we're creatures of habit, right? And another reason.
Culture is something that's so ingrained in your identity, you don't even really think about it.
You don't. You really don't. And so, just to kind of further make that point, Ira, because I think it's an important one, I need 5 volunteers up front, and all you got to do, really, all you got to be able to do is just throw a little hacky sack. That's it. You don't have to stand on your head or any gymnastics. You just got to be able to throw a little hacky sack. So just 5 volunteers up front. Just to, I want to show you about culture. Oh, good. And just form a circle and face each other. But kind of out a little bit. One more. Just one more. Oh, good. Okay. And spread out a little bit. You know, so you got a little room. Okay, good. So Rachel, you're going to be the team leader, and here's how it goes. You just take this hacky sack, you're going to throw it to some person, they're going to throw it to a different person, then to a different person, then to a different person, and then back to you. Okay?
Oh, I can't even. Should I have video?
Nope. Okay, now we're going to do it just a tiny bit faster, but the same order. So then back to Rachel. Same people that just hear to this fast enough. Okay. Good. Now I'm going to make it a little bit more challenging. Because now when you throw this yellow one, I'm going to also then, right after you've thrown that one, give you the blue one to throw, and then make sure Rachel gets both of these back again. Same order? Same order, same order. Yep, exactly the same order. Good job. Look at this. Okay, now that you're all warmed up, okay? Now all you got to do this time, Rachel, because senior management has said you need to cut cycle time by 50% So now you got to do it 50% faster. Go. Oh, did they do it 50% faster? Oh, okay, now do it 50% faster. Go. That's good. Okay. What happened the first time? What happened the first time was that in a matter of minutes, a pattern had been created. A behavioral pattern had been created, even after we only did it 3 times in a row, right? But then what happened the second time? What did Rachel do the second time? She stepped in. She stepped in, she changed the pattern. And that's the key to trying to look at culture changes, is that it's so entrenched with doing things the way we've always done it. Just imagine, that was 3 minutes. Imagine when it's 20 years you've done it the same way, how difficult that is. And the only way possible for that to shift is to have multiple people's behaviors change. And that's the other side of values. So values are the beliefs and the norm, are the beliefs that we have, but the norms are the behaviors and the communications that we engage in an organization to reinforce the values. And that's where the two have to mesh up. And so if we're talking about creating a culture of innovation, it's got to be not only the values, but also how we behave and communicate to people within our own companies and organizations. So let me give you my 10 innovation best practices real quick. Because I think that these really embrace what organizations and companies that do innovation well do. The first 2 relate to strategy. So they set expectations. They say, here's what we want innovation to do for us, for our organization. It may be to get into a new market, it may be to get into a new segment, it may be to cost reduce. It may be to just protect and defend what we've got today. And all of those are great, but let's agree on it, and let's agree as a company, let's agree as a team what innovation really means. Second is to create a portfolio. How many of you take all of your investments and put it in one stock that you expect to go up by 1,000%? How many? I didn't think so, right? You invest in a portfolio. And so the same is true with innovation. It's looking at some new to the world, new to the company, new to the organization, but also some that are going to be closer in, more what I call incremental innovation along with radical innovation. Numbers 3, 4, and 5 all relate to having a systematic process that I'll share with you in just a second. But its focus is on going out to the marketplace and understanding customer problems, issues, and needs, or if it's internal innovation, employees' problems, issues, and needs, and then being able to come up with solutions that will solve those by using a systematic and disciplined process. But look at these last 5. It all relates to culture. And so for me, I mean, this has to be done in cross-functional teams. Why? And I also believe in as much diversity as possible. Diversity in terms of everything. Age and race and backgrounds and experiences and different functions and why? Why do you think? For an innovation team. Different perspectives, different experiences, and different capabilities at solving problems. And that's ultimately what we're trying to look for. In addition, we've got to be able to keep score. And most companies don't do this. And you know what the saddest thing is? Most senior level people will be able to repeat back to you more of the failures than they will necessarily the successes. A number of years ago, I created a metric for looking at return on innovation, where you put in the numerator the cumulative profits and losses too, that have been generated in the marketplace, divided by all the costs that went into the creation of them up to day 1. And companies that do this well should be generating a 30 to 40% return on innovation. And if they're not, then you got to look at this. But it's over time too. It's over 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It's not in the next 90 days or in the next 12 months. Rewarding and celebrating success and accepting failure. I'm also a strong believer in financial rewards. The psychic rewards, I think we're all we understand the value of those, although Many organizations don't do enough of them. And in fact, I'm working on a new book right now that the working title of it is called Where's My Candy? The Value of Recognition. Because recognition isn't really done well in companies, for the most part, that I find. And so the more, would you mind if I just got this? The more you find, the more I look in companies in terms of this issue of recognition, both the psychic and emotional as well as the financial, one of the biggest missing pieces is the financial rewards. So if we go home tonight, and the 5 of us are on an innovation team, and we go to our friend, self, or spouse, and we take $10,000 out of the bank, and we go into work tomorrow, and we give the $50,000 to Gil. He's the CEO. Okay. So what's he got now? Well, he puts $50,000 into the company coffers. What do we get? We now own 2% of all the future earnings that come from the new innovations that we ultimately will create and get into the marketplace. And 5 years from now, what's that mean? That means we go home to our friend, self, or spouse, and we say, oh, we didn't need that $10,000 anyway, because the return has been 0 based on real market performance. Or we each go home with a check for $400,000, because that reflected 2% of the earnings of whatever those new innovations were that we created in the marketplace. Now, before anybody starts saying, oh my God, $400,000. He got 98% of the earnings, right? Remember, from the beginning, I just said we were going to take 2%. And so, figuring out some way, I'm not saying that's the way, but some way of simulating more of an entrepreneurial environment and finding both big companies and small companies, it's beneficial. How many of you do something like that today? How many of you reward innovation based on performance in the marketplace? No? Really? Nobody? Oh, come on. Bonuses, yeah, I mean bonuses, but not really for specific performance. It's more the overall how the overall company's doing. Amanda?
Because we do, it's not necessarily a good idea, but we're a multi-employer. Many of our employees are allowed to self-employed. So if you're at a baseball game, and somebody wants to use our card, you get to set up fees, you don't have to manage the account.
Sure.
Good. So it makes you want to always be innovative and think of what you want to.
So it makes you, it really puts it top of mind. Great, yeah.
So the biggest pushback that I get when I bring that up is how we have to make it fair.
Right.
You know, there's different job functions. How do we make it fair?
Exactly.
And that's the pushback that we get.
Yeah. So, and I got an answer for you, because I get that. Oh my gosh, I get that same pushback all the time. Plus, we got the 8-point system, and it's not up, and we can't do it up. And what happens to these folks? Because they weren't part of the innovation team. But you know, and my answer is then work within the existing bonus structure. Right? Most all companies have some type of variable bonus comp. Just have 100% of that variable bonus comp be focused on innovation resource. So at least with that, right? So don't eliminate the component of it that relates to how the overall company's doing, and at least use that as one method. The other then is to find other ways to do it. And a cheap way that I find always effective is to give people savings bonds. You know, you can give them a $5,000 savings bond, and it only costs you $2,500. Now it takes 7 years or whatever it is now to mature, but it's just it's the idea of giving something but based on market performance. When Carol Bernick was the CEO at Alberto Culver, one of the things that I loved that she did was that she said any team, any innovation team that came up with, just got a new concept to the marketplace, they'd get $50,000 that would be shared amongst themselves. Now there'd be 6 or 7 people on the team, so we're not talking about that much money. But then, if it hit a benchmark by the end of year 1, the same team got $100,000. So it was then 50 and 100. And even then, right, we're not talking about all that much, but man, was that a compelling thing for that innovation team. So if you can't really change that much, then even within the variable bonus comp, then find some other anecdotal ways of providing financial rewards and support. And then lastly, creating an innovation culture. So, two other things. This was setting a vision and an expectation for what you want innovation to do for your organization. This, what company was this? Honda. And so I'll take you back a dozen years ago when the then 82-year-old chairman of Honda had his executive team for a 7:30 a.m. Strategic planning meeting. And he asked them a question. He said, in 5 years from now, how many Hondas in every garage? And so one of his executives raised his hand and said, 200 cars in every garage. The chairman said, wrong answer. In 5 years from now, how many Hondas in every garage? And then another one sheepishly raised his hand and said, 3 Honda cars in every garage. The chairman says, wrong answer. In 5 years from now, 6 Hondas in every garage. Well, it was now 7:33, and they thought the then 82-year-old guy had finally lost it because they knew that you can't put 6 Honda cars in every garage. What was his vision, though? What? Right, and diversify it into products that would leverage the Honda brand name, engine technology, and the whole idea of miniaturization. So the 6 that he wanted in there was a Honda snowblower and lawnmower and turbine engine and motorcycle and car and jet plane and so that I find to be really important. The other thing I wanted to share is the whole idea of serial innovators and serial entrepreneurs. Has anybody heard or know of Elon Musk? Yeah. And now, those of you that haven't heard of, he created PayPal and then sold it to eBay for about $1.5 billion. So he did have a little cash in his pocket to try some other things. But SpaceX and Tesla and SolarCity are 3 of the new companies over the last few years that he's formed. Just to give you an idea, Tesla in January of this year traded at $33 a share. 2 days ago, it was $193 a share. So it's gone from 33 to 193. And I think, quite honestly, electric cars here to stay. If you don't know, he's also working on supercharging stations that will go across the country. And about this time next year, you'll be able to have an app that will enable you to drive a Tesla car from New York to California, and you'll know exactly where the supercharging stations are. It'll only take about 20 minutes instead of the overnight type of things. And has anybody heard of the ET3, which is the tube that a frictionless, airless tube that you'll sit in and you'll be able to go from San Francisco to Los Angeles in about 30 minutes. And I'm sure he'll be able to create that too. The point of this isn't about the magnitude of the success. It's the mindset. It's the mindset of always trying to look at new things. And that's where the leadership thing comes in this whole discussion. And so I want to leave you with this in terms of thinking about leadership. I mentioned to you the values-based leadership book that Susan and I wrote in the mid-1990s. We came out with a new book in 2007 called Apples Are Square, Thinking Differently About Leadership. And in fact, Deepak Chopra wrote the forward to the second edition. We went out and interviewed a lot of leaders that fell across a wide variety of different organizations. Here's what we found. We found 6 values or 6 characteristics that for the most part they all embraced. And these were humility as opposed to ego, collaboration as opposed to competition, compassion or relationship building, inclusiveness as opposed to exclusivity, decisiveness because leaders need to be decisive, but decisions based on values, not just based on profits, and lastly, transparency or openness. Now, when you think about this type of leader, somebody who's humble, compassionate, fully focused on the needs of others, who's decisive, but decisiveness based on values, open, vulnerable, transparent, what's that conjure up? What's that type of leader usually do for people within an organization? How does it make them feel?
It inspires them.
It inspires them. How or why?
They feel trusted. They feel that they are able to express themselves.
And that's the key word. That's the key word is they feel trusted and they feel valued. What else does that type of leader typically make you feel?
Likable.
The person's likable, approachable. Great. What else? Empowering people. And so here's what I always find. I find that there's also a generational issue tied to this leadership archetype. And somehow people in the 20, 30, and early 40s group, typically the response to this is, yeah, of course. And then typically, not this group, because this is an enlightened group, but in other groups what I'll find is somewhere about the age of 55 and above, suddenly the response to this is, well, those seem like feminine characteristics. How's that going to drive stock price appreciation? How's that going to drive EBITDA? My response to this is, innovative, progressive companies are looking for these types of leaders. And it's not leaders that are just at the top. It's a shared leadership construct. And it's a shared leadership construct that also understands the core tenets of servant leadership. And so Susan and I wanted to get rid of the word leadership. Instead of leadership, always focusing on the leader, and instead coin a term called peopleship. So that this is really about peopleship, where we're trying to convey and communicate that the real job of the leader is to find every way that he and she can to make sure that every employee and everybody who's coming up with some new creative and thoughtful idea is valued and is recognized. And just to be controversial, I'm a strong believer in throwing out all of the weaknesses and the development needs on your performance reviews. I'm a believer in let's just start focusing on people's strengths. And let's build those, and let's do everything we can from one day and week and year to the next to be able to make sure that the incredible asset that we have in our own companies, i.e. our people, are really truly viewed as the most important asset. And ultimately, they're the ones that create an innovation culture and mindset. And they're the ones that we have to treat with extra special. So let me leave you with this one last little story. And it's a story about, we've got the book of a little boy who's walking along the shore throwing starfish into the sea. Have you heard of this one? And so he's throwing starfish into the sea, and a man comes up to him and says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Oh, I'm saving all the starfish in the whole world." And the man wants to give him a real world life lesson and says, "Well, son, there's millions and millions of starfish, so you can't really save them. You're just kind of wasting your time. So don't try to do that one anymore." And the little boy says, "Oh, okay." And so the man leaves and feels good because he's provided this young boy with a lifelong lesson, and turns around and sees the young boy throwing another starfish into the sea. And so he looks at him and he says, "But I thought I explained to you, you can't make a difference because there's millions and millions of starfish." And the little boy said, "But I sure made a difference in that one starfish's life." And so I'd say the same to each of you. Each of you individually can make a huge difference in creating a culture of innovation within your own companies and organizations. And I hope you do. Great to be with you.